Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles. I was only 4 years old when my parents died in a car crash one moment. I had a family, and the next my world shattered into a million pieces, but I wasn't alone. Not entirely. I had my brother Alex. He was just 18, barely an adult himself with his whole life ahead of him. He could have chosen to walk away to live his own life, but he didn't. Instead, he stood by me, made a promise at our parents' funeral that he would raise me, and he never broke it. I still remember that day standing next to him, my small hand gripping his as people murmured condolences we didn't know how to respond to. I was too young to understand the weight of what had happened, but I understood one thing. Alex wasn't leaving. "I got you, Scotty," he whispered to me that day, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter what, I got you," and he did. Alex gave up college, gave up the life he might have had, and instead took a job at a garage working long hours as a mechanic to make sure I had everything we didn't have much, but he made sure I never felt the absence of our parents. In the ways that mattered most, birthdays were never forgotten. He packed my lunches, showed up to my school events, and made sure I had a home to come back to. He never let me feel like a burden, but he also made sure I could stand on my own 2 feet. "Listen, kid," he said one evening when I was around 10, watching him wipe grease off his hands after coming home from work, "the world's tough and I can't always be there to fight your battles for you. I don't need you to fight my battles." I shot back, crossing my arms. He smirked, ruffling my hair. "Oh yeah, we'll see about that." That's when he signed me up for wrestling and kickboxing. He told me it was for discipline, for confidence. But I knew better. He wanted to make sure I could protect myself. I trained hard, pushed through every match, every bruise, because I wanted to make him proud. And I usually did. Life went on, and Alex built a circle of friends, big guys, bikers, real tough men, the kind of men who walked into a room and made people think twice before starting trouble. I was the little brother, the kid they all looked out for, and I won't lie, having that kind of backup had its perks. There were a few times when things got out of hand and I had to make a call. Sometimes a situation needed more than just words or fists, and when that happened, I knew I had a small army ready to step in. But I never let that life pull me away from my goals, Scott. "You're smart," Alex would say whenever he caught me slacking. "You've got a brain sharper than any wrench in my damn toolbox, use it." And I did. No matter what was happening outside, I made sure my studies never took a hit. I worked my ass off balancing school, training, and everything in between. Then came Christine. When Alex told me he was getting married, I didn't know what to think. It had been just the two of us for so long that the idea of someone else stepping in felt strange. But Christine wasn't just someone else. She was the missing piece we didn't know we needed. She walked into our lives and made us a real family. "Scott, I expect your homework to be done before you even think about touching that wrestling mat?" she'd say, arms crossed. Her no-nonsense looked daring me to argue I already did it. I'd smirk, thinking I had the upper hand. "Good, then you can go over it again and make sure you got everything right." She'd fire back, leaving no room for negotiation. She was tougher than I expected, but never in a way that made me feel unwanted. She pushed me, made sure I didn't slack off, and at the same time, she spoiled me in ways I'd never admit out loud. Alex had stepped up as my father figure. But Christine, she made sure I felt like her son life was good, and then the day came. The moment that proved everything they had done for me wasn't in vain. The envelope arrived, thick and official-looking. My hands shook as I tore it open, scanning the words inside my breath, catching in my throat. "Well," Alex asked, standing over my shoulder. I looked up at him, eyes wide. "I got in?" Christine gasped, covering her mouth. "Scott, oh my God." "MIT, hell yeah," I grinned, heart pounding me. MIT was different. It was a whole new world. Brilliant minds, cutting-edge technology, and a level of compet that could crush anyone who wasn't prepared. But I was ready. Mechanical engineering wasn't just something I studied. It was something I lived and breathed every class, every project I pushed myself to go beyond what was expected. I don't like to boast, but I wasn't just another student grinding through assignments. I had ideas. Real ideas. New designs for tools that could reduce manpower effort in the automobile industry. Efficiency, precision, durability. I wanted to create tools that made mechanics' lives easier. That revolutionized the way work was done in garages and factories. "Scott, you're onto something here," my professor told me one day, holding up one of my prototypes, but ideas don't mean much unless you protect them. That's when I started looking into patents. I made sure every innovation I created was legally mine. By the time I was done with MIT, I had 138 patents registered. 138. And that's when Gregory Spencer walked into my life. I remember the first time I saw him, 60 years old. Silver hair, sharp suit, he carried himself like a man who had seen the world, made his fortune, and wasn't done yet. He had been in the oil business in Texas, made a killing, and then sold it all. Now he was looking for his next big move. We met in a sleek, high-end restaurant, the kind of place where the stack costs as much as a month's rent. He leaned back in his chair, studying me over a glass of whiskey. "I've been hearing a lot about you, Scott," he said, his voice steady, controlled, a young man with a sharp mind and a whole lot of patents to his name. "You're not just an engineer, you're an innovator." I smirked, leaning forward. "And you're a man with a lot of money looking for a reason to spend it." He chuckled, nodding, smart and direct. "I like that. Tell me, what do you need?" I knew exactly what I needed: an investor who could fuel my dreams, and he needed a man he could trust with Gregory's $10 million investment. We hit the ground running. We started small, a single factory producing tools a month. It was a modest beginning, but within a year we had scaled up to 10 times that, 10,000 tools a month. Orders rolling in from auto giants and small garages alike. We were making waves in the industry, and I could feel it. This was just the beginning. Then one day Gregory called me into his office. "I want you to meet someone," he said, with a knowing smirk. And that's when I saw her, Lauren Spencer, tall, hot, and downright sexy. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and make every man forget what he was doing. She had long legs that went on forever, piercing green eyes, and an attitude that screamed confidence the moment she walked in. I knew I was in trouble. I didn't waste any time. "Lauren," I said, flashing a grin. "How about dinner tonight?" She arched an eyebrow, looking amused. "You don't waste time. Do you? Life's short?" I shrugged. Might as well get to the good part. She laughed, and just like that, I had a date. Here's the thing they say a man should always think with his head, the one on top, the one that houses a brain. But sometimes a man doesn't. Your heart can pump blood only in one direction. Apparently for me, my heart pumped the wrong head. A week later she was in my bed. 2 weeks later. Gregory sat across from me, sipping his whiskey, watching me with that unreadable expression of his. Then he leaned forward and asked, "What going on with you and my daughter?" I didn't hesitate. "I like her," I said simply, "and if things go well, I might just end up settling with her." Gregory studied me for a moment, then smiled. "My investment is safe?" We both laughed. 2 months later, I decided it was time to introduce Lauren to Alex and Christine. It felt like a big step, but I figured it was necessary. Family had always been everything to me, and if Lauren was going to be part of my future, she had to be a part of theirs too. We had dinner at Alex and Christine's place. A nice quiet evening with good food, some laughs, and a few glasses of wine. Lauren was charming, polite, and carried herself with that effortless confidence that had drawn me in from day one. Christine was warm, engaging, and asked all the right questions. But something about the way she observed Lauren made me feel like she was sizing her up. Alex, as always, was laid back, letting the conversation flow naturally. When the evening wrapped up, I left feeling good about how things had gone. But the next day, Christine pulled me aside. "Scott," she said, her voice careful but firm. "I don't like her." That caught me off guard. "What?" "Why?" She hesitated for a moment before choosing her words. "She's polished. I'll give her that. But there's something about her. Something off. I don't think she's here for the right reasons. Besides you. Like dogs, she does not. I frowned. Christine. Come on. You barely know her, and yet I know enough, she said, crossing her arms. I just want you to be careful. I know you, Scott. You jump in with both feet, and I don't want you to drown. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. Alex. Feel the same way. Christine exhaled, talked to him. So I did. Later that night, I sat down with Alex, expecting him to either back Christine up completely or tell me I was overthinking it instead. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those sharp, assessing eyes of his. Do you love her? He asked. Simply, yeah, I said without hesitation. Okay. He nodded. Then answer me this. Do you have even the smallest doubt? I hesitated. Not because I didn't love Lauren, but because Christine's words had planted something in my mind. Alex noticed he always did. Scott, listen, he said, if you're completely sure, go ahead. But if there's even a shred of doubt, don't do it. Doubt has a way of growing into regret. I didn't have an answer for him then. But I did later. 7 months after that dinner, I got down on one knee, looked into Lauren's eyes, and asked her to marry me. She said yes, a few weeks before the wedding. Gregory called me into his office. I had been expecting some kind of conversation, maybe advice about marriage or a long-winded speech about taking care of his daughter. But instead he leaned back in his chair, fingers laced together, and got straight to business. I want to restructure the company. He said. I raised an eyebrow. All right, what's the plan? He exhaled as if choosing his words carefully. Lauren will take over the majority of the shares. The company will be split between you two, but she'll hold the controlling interest. I nodded, slowly. Makes sense. Check your daughter exactly. He said, watching me closely. I put in the money, you put in the work. But at the end of the day, this company needs to stay in the family. I'm making sure of that. It didn't bother me. I had always known the money wasn't mine. It was Gregory's investment that made it all possible. I had built the company with my designs, my sweat, and my vision. But without his backing, none of it would have existed in the first place. So what do I get? I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. You'll hold 10%. He said, you still have a say, and you'll still make money, but Lauren will be the majority shareholder. I shrugged. Fine by me. Gregory smiled. I knew you'd understand. Then he slid a folder across the desk. There's also the matter of the prenup. I picked it up, flipping through the pages. The terms were straightforward. If you and Lauren divorce under irreconcilable differences, she keeps her 90% of the company and takes 50% of everything you make after getting married. Gregory explained, if there's cheating involved, the cheated party gets 100% of everything made after marriage. The business, however, stays untouched in both cases. I looked up at him. So basically, if I cheat, she gets everything. If she cheats, I get everything. He nodded. Exactly. I leaned back in my chair, letting it all sink in. Gregory was a businessman, to the core. He wasn't just protecting Lauren, he was protecting the company, making sure it stayed in Spencer's hands, no matter what happened between us. But I wasn't worried. I wasn't planning on cheating, and I wasn't planning on divorcing as far as I was concerned. This was just paperwork. I grabbed the pen, flipped to the last page, and signed, I agree. I said after the prenup was signed, the wedding went off without a hitch. It was everything Lauren had dreamed of, extravagant, elegant, and filled with high-profile guests for me. It was about marrying the woman I loved. The honeymoon was just as incredible. We traveled, we laughed, and we made sure to enjoy every moment. It was the kind of start to a marriage that made you think nothing could ever go wrong. A year later, Christopher was born. The moment I held him in my arms, everything changed. I had built a company. I had made a name for myself. But none of it compared to the feeling of being a father. Life was good, great even. Business was thriving. and at home we were settling into our new roles as parents. But as they say, life is a roller coaster. It goes up and it comes down. At first I didn't notice it. The little comments Lauren made about Alex and Christine seemed harmless. Offhand remarks about their house, their clothes, the people they spent time with. You know, it wouldn't hurt if Alex dressed a little better, she said one evening as we were getting ready for bed. I shrugged. It off HEK, a mechanic. Lauren, he doesn't need to wear a suit to work, I know. But even outside of work, I mean, Scott, he doesn't exactly fit in with the people we meet at these events. I frowned but let it slide. She had never been close with Alex, and maybe she just didn't know how to connect, but the comments didn't stop. I mean, Christine is nice, but don't you think she's a little rough? Rough? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, just a bit unpolished, she said with a small smirk. She's very direct. She's real, I said simply. And that's why I like her. Lauren just hummed and changed the subject. Soon it became more than just comments. Lauren started finding ways to keep me from visiting them. There was always a reason. A dinner. A business event. Some urgent matter that needed my attention. I saw what she was doing, but I wasn't about to let it happen. One evening, after yet another excuse to cancel dinner at Alexis, I finally confronted her. Lauren, what's your problem with my brother? She sighed, rubbing her temples. It's not a problem, Scott. I just think you should spend more time focusing on us, on our family. You're not a kid anymore. You don't need to run to Alex every weekend. I folded my arms. He raised me. He and Christine are my family, too. She exhaled sharply. I just don't think they're good for you. That's all. You're building something incredible, and they don't fit into that world. I stared at her for a long moment, then shook my head. Lauren, I don't care about fitting into any world. My brother and his family will always be part of my life. If you have a problem with that, that's on you. She didn't like it, but she didn't push any further from then on. I made it clear I would not be choosing between my wife and my family. I made the balance work, made sure neither felt neglected. It wasn't always easy, but I did it. Things settled down, and life moved on. 7 years flew by, and life was good. At least on the surface, the business had grown beyond what I had ever imagined. We were no longer just a small factory producing tools. We were an industry name, and we were gearing up to take the company public. It was everything I had worked for, the dream I had built from scratch. Then, as I've said before, life is a damn roller coaster. One evening, Lauren came home beaming, practically glowing with excitement. Scott, I have someone I want you to meet, she said, leading a tall, smug-looking man into the room. This is Austin Taylor, my childhood friend. Austin extended his hand, his grip firm, almost trying to overpower mine in some unspoken display of dominance. His smile was polite, but there was something behind his eyes that I didn't like. Arrogance, entitlement. I had been around enough people in business to know his type. Someone who thought the world owed him something, Scott, he said, his voice smooth but insincere. I've heard so much about. You wish I could say the same, I replied, keeping my expression neutral. Lauren shot me a look but quickly turned back to Austin, laughing. Austin just moved back from Europe. He's worked on multiple IPOs, and I thought he'd be a great addition to the company. I frowned. Addition? In what capacity? She smiled a little too brightly. I've hired him to head our vendor relationships and client management department. My entire body stiffened. My department? You did what I asked. My voice dangerously calm. Lauren waved a hand like it was nothing. It's a strategic move. Scott, with the IPO coming up, we need someone who has experience handling big investors. International clients. Austin is perfect for the job. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. What are his qualifications? Lauren barely missed a beat before brushing off the question. Come on, Scott, do we really need to go over RS? Austin has experience. He's worked in Europe. He knows the game. Then give me references, I countered. Show me where he's worked, who he's worked with. She sighed clearly. Irritated Scott for him. I don't need that. That was when I knew something was wrong. This wasn't just about hiring some guy for a position. There was more to it. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Lauren, this is my department. You didn't even talk to me before making this decision. And that's when it happened. The moment I knew. Things had shifted in a way I hadn't seen coming. Lauren crossed her arms and looked at me, her expression turning cold. Scott, I am the CEO, and I have hired him. Do you have any more questions? I walked out of the room without another word. If I had stayed, I might have said something I couldn't take back. My blood was boiling, and my mind was racing. Lauren had never pulled rank on me like that before. Not in business. Not in our marriage. This wasn't a disagree agent. This was a power play, and I wasn't sure what bothered me more, the decision itself, or the way she had shut me down like my opinion didn't matter. That evening, she found me in our home office staring at my laptop screen, but not really seeing anything. I heard her footsteps as she approached, her voice soft and careful. Scott, can we talk? I didn't look at her. Go ahead. She sighed and sat on the edge of my desk. I know you're upset. Upset. I finally turned to face her, my jaw tight. Lauren, you hired someone from my department. Without even talking to me, and when I questioned it, you threw the CEO card in my face like I was just some random employee. You don't think that's a problem? Her expression remained calm. Almost too calm. I didn't mean it like that. I had to make a decision. We're moving fast toward the IPO, and Austin has experience. He can help us. Scott, help us. How you won't even give me a straight answer about his qualifications. I leaned forward, my frustration spilling over. Business has to be treated as business. Lauren, hiring the wrong person, especially now, can seriously damage our IPO prospects. We can't afford mistakes. She hesitated for a moment as if considering my words, but then her face hardened. I understand your concerns, but my decision is final. Austin is staying. I let out a slow breath, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk. I wanted to fight this push back harder, but something in her tone told me it wouldn't matter. She had already made up her mind, and no amount of reasoning was going to change it. That was the first crack in our relationship. It didn't take me more than 3 days to realize Austin had no clue what he was doing. Meetings with vendors turned into pointless chatter, contracts were mishandled, and his so-called experience never materialized into anything tangible. The man was all talk, no substance. I knew something was off. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I called an old friend, Gerald Smith. He was a private investigator, one of the best. Gerald, I need you to find out everything about a man named Austin Taylor from the day he was born to this very moment. I want to know where he's been, who talked to, what he had for breakfast, if possible. Gerald chuckled on the other end. Sounds serious, Scott, it is. I said, my voice firm, and I need it fast. He got to work, and for the next 3 weeks, I went about my business pretending nothing was wrong. Lauren carried on as if nothing had changed completely, unaware that I was pulling at a thread that might unravel everything. Then one afternoon, Gerald called. You need to come see this, he said, his voice unusually serious. I met him in his office the moment I walked in. He locked the door behind me, poured a drink, and handed it to me. You ready? He asked. I nodded, gripping the glass. Gerald leaned forward. Austin and Lauren were childhood sweethearts. He began. They went to school together, went to college together. Then about 8 years ago, they had a falling out. That's when you came into the picture and married her. My grip on the glass tightened. I already didn't like where this was going. Gerald continued, his voice measured. I hacked into Austin's personal email. He poured another drink, filling my glass again before looking me dead in the eye. 7 years ago, Austin was in town. You, however, were in Detroit for a week, on business. I found emails between Lauren and him. From that time, I swallowed hard, a strange feeling settling in my gut. Gerald exhaled, almost as if he didn't want to say the next words. Scott, Christopher might not be your son. The room suddenly felt too small, The air, too thick. My mind went blank for a second, then filled with 1,000 thoughts all at once. That was something I was not ready for. I gulped down my dream in one swift motion, the burn of the alcohol doing nothing to numb. The storm raging inside me, I held out my glass for a refill, and without a word, Gerald obliged pouring until the amber liquid reached the halfway mark. Gerald continued now, as for his work experience, he has been fired from 3 companies and has been blacklisted in Denmark and Finland. He was found guilty of financial fraud and had even served 5 months in jail. I heard and said, I am not surprised. I knew he knows nothing other than sweet talk. People he studied me for a moment before, finally asking, "What do you want to do, man?" I leaned back in my chair, swirling the drink in my hand. My mind was racing, but my face remained calm. I took a slow sip before setting the glass down. "Give me a pen and a piece of paper," I said. Gerald raised an eyebrow but reached into his desk and handed them over. I took them without hesitation and started writing. Step 1. Get the DNA test for Christopher. I paused for a second, staring at the words. I love that kid more than anything. But if he wasn't mine, I wouldn't allow myself to be trapped in this lie. I wouldn't drag this relationship any further than it already had been. Step 2. Revenge. I underlined the word twice, pressing the pen into the paper, harder than necessary. Gerald leaned over. Reading what I had written, "You sure about this?" he asked, his tone cautious. I exhaled a slow, deliberate breath, then looked up at him with a smirk. "She wants to take the company public in the next 3 months. I said, my voice steady by then. I'll make sure she gets exactly what she deserves. I might not have to do anything. Austin will do everything for me." I reached into my jacket, pulled out a thick stack of bills, and placed it on Gerald's desk. He glanced at the 10 grand, then back at me, his smirk widening. "Now," I said, my voice steady but laced with cold determination, "I want every single detail on Austin. His calls, his texts, his emails. I want it all, every move he makes. I need to know before he even knows it himself." Gerald chuckled, pocketing the cash. "You got it, man. I'll set everything up. Give me a few days and you'll have your first update." I nodded, stood up, and without another word walked out of his office into the cool night air. My mind was set. There was no turning back. Now the drive home felt longer than usual, every red light testing my patience, every second stretching like an eternity. As soon as I stepped inside, I went straight to my office, pulled out my laptop, and ordered a DNA test kit the next morning while Christopher was still half asleep. I gently swabbed the inside of his cheek. He barely stirred, mumbling something incoherent before rolling over. My hand shook slightly as I took my own sample and sealed the kit within the hour I had it shipped. Out to the lab then came the waiting 3 weeks of restless nights of forcing myself to smile when Christopher called me Dad, of pretending everything was normal, while inside I was a wreck. When the email finally came, my stomach twisted into a knot. I clicked on the attachment and read the words that would change everything. Probability of paternity, 0%. I sat there staring at the screen, rereading it over and over as if the words would somehow change, but they wouldn't. They were cold, final, undeniable. He wasn't my son? A part of me wanted to grieve, to mourn the years of love I had given to a child who wasn't mine. But that grief was quickly swallowed by something else, something darker, something more powerful. I wasn't just going to walk away. No, that would be too easy. Lauren had built this web of lies around me, thinking I'd never find my way out. But I wasn't just going to escape. I was going to burn it all down. I didn't just want to divorce her. I wanted to wreck her. I wanted to leave her on the streets, stripped of everything she had taken for granted. I wanted to bring the pain to her. I pulled into Alex's driveway. I needed to see them. My brother and Christine. They were the only ones I could trust. The only ones who had my back. No matter what, as soon as I stepped inside, Christine's sharp eyes locked onto me. She had always been perceptive, able to read me like an open book, before I even had a chance to speak. She folded her arms and said, "What happened?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the DNA test results, and handed them to her. She took the paper, her eyes scanning the words, and then she gasped. That lying, cheating. She cut herself off, inhaling sharply, before unleashing a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. Alex, who had been leaning against the kitchen counter, straightened up. "Scott." Christine took a deep breath, shaking her head in disbelief. That woman, after everything she exhaled, sharply, then fixed her gaze on me. Now, what I turned to. "Alex," my voice steady, deliberate. "You get an email soon for the renewal of your contract. Hold on to it for a few weeks." His lips curled into a knowing smirk. "You want to completely wreck them." It wasn't a question, it was an understanding between brothers. I nodded. "Now, here's something I never told anyone. The 138 patents that fueled our company, the ones that made our business the empire. It was today. They weren't registered under Lauren's name or mine, no. They belonged to a company named Garage Brothers, and the owner, my brother Alex. Alex was the reason I had become the man I was. He is the reason I am what I am today. He is the reason for my success. In the last 10 years, he had become a millionaire from the royalties our business had paid him. Money was never my concern if I needed it. I had my brother. That's how it had always been since we were kids. And that's how it would always be. Blood is thicker than wood. I drove home that night with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place, and now it was time to execute the next phase of my plan. Over the next few weeks, the cracks in the company started to show. Clients began calling frustrated, impatient, angry, delayed deliveries. No responses from the new head of department. A growing sense of incompetence hanging over every conversation. "Scott, what the hell is going on over there?" One of our biggest clients, Daniel Carter, demanded over the phone. "We've got deadlines to meet and your vendor team is ghosting us." I leaned back in my chair, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "Daniel, I understand. I'll personally look into it." I never did, one by one. The calls kept coming, some from clients, others from vendors wondering why invoices were unpaid, some polite, some downright furious. Each time I assured them I'd handle it, and each time I did nothing, Lauren never heard a word about any of it. She was too busy trusting her brilliant new hire, Austin Taylor, to handle things. I let her believe it. I watched from the shadows as our company's reputation started to rot from the inside, just like Homer Simpson's once said. If you don't like your job, you don't strike you. Just go in every day and do it really half-fast. That's the American way, and vendor management was not even my work. So listening to the wise words by Homer, I stopped reaching the office on time. I stopped looking at the production lines. I stopped weekly reviews. And then came the financial review meeting, the final step before filing for the IPO, a critical moment for the company, an all-hands-on-deck situation. I didn't show up. It wasn't long before my phone rang. Lauren's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. "Scott, where the hell are you?" she demanded. I smirked. At home." She repeated, incredulous, "This is one of the biggest meetings of our lives. You're supposed to be here." I let out a sigh, fighting disinterest. "Lauren, I'm the head of production. Remember, this is a financial review." "I have nothing to contribute you," she started, but I cut her off. "Austin is handling it, isn't he?" I said, voice smooth. "After all, you hired him. You said he's got experience with multiple IPOs, so I'm sure he'll knock it out of the park." Silence. For the first time, I heard hesitation in her breathing before she could say a word. I hung up. I had already gone through the financial report Austin was going to present. I had seen the financial report. I knew exactly what kind of disaster Austin was walking into that meeting with. But the best part, Lauren didn't on paper. The company looked like it was sitting on a mountain of cash. Millions, just sitting in the bank, to an outsider. It screamed stability, profitability, and strong financial health. Exactly What investors wanted to see before an IPO, but reality that money wasn't ours to keep Austin in. His infinite wisdom had deliberately delayed vendor payments to inflate our balance sheets. He thought he was playing the system holding on a money. That wasn't ours to create the illusion of financial strength. Meanwhile, on the other end, payments from clients had slowed to a crawl. Why? Because no product was being delivered, no delivery, no payment. Simple as that, the financials were a ticking time bomb, and yet, in that boardroom, Lauren swallowed every single number Austin threw at her without question. Other department heads, whether too scared or too indifferent, said nothing. And just like that, Lauren and Austin pushed forward with the IPO. They set the stock price at $5 per share, ambitious, considering the mess we were in. But to me, that number wasn't just a valuation. It was an opportunity. My stake in the company was worth a solid $10 million at that price. And I knew exactly who to offload it to: someone with deep pockets, someone who trusted Lauren blindly, someone who wouldn't think twice before making the deal. My father-in-law, Gregory, was a businessman to his core. If there was money to be made, he was always the first in line, and I knew exactly how to bait him. I reached out to him one evening, casually bringing up an idea. "Greg, I've been thinking about buying a mansion, something big, something grand." "A real statement property," I said, swirling the whiskey in my glass as we sat in his study. "But I don't want to touch my cash reserves right now. The IPO is around the corner and I want to keep my finances clean." He raised an eyebrow. Intrigued. "And what does that have to do with me?" I leaned forward. "I want to sell you my shares, 10%. I know the IPO price is $5 a share, but for you, I'll give it at a discount $9 million for my share. You know as well as I do that once we go public, that price will skyrocket. You'll make an easy fortune, and I'll get the mansion without dipping into my personal fonts." Gregory smirked. "You're telling me I get 10% of the company for a steal, and my daughter ends up with a mansion?" He chuckled. "You must really love her, or you were planning something else." I nodded, putting on my best earnest expression. "Of course, this is all for her, but I want it to be a surprise, so let's keep this between us." Yeah, Gregory was predictable. He never passed up a good deal, and this one was too sweet for him to resist. He wired the money within 24 hours, taking full ownership of my shares now. Did I trust him to keep quiet? Not for a second, but I also knew Lauren. Even if Gregory spilled the beans, she would be thrilled to her. It would mean that at the end of the day, everything would still belong to her. She'd get full control of the company. Once Gregory eventually handed over those shares, and on top of that, she'd have a brand new mansion. It was a win-win situation, at least in her mind. A few days before the IPO launch, I went to office and received a call from Lauren to come and meet her. So I went. The moment I stepped into the office, I could smell the tension. Lauren and Austin were already in the meeting room, their faces tight with worry. I walked in casually, hands in my pockets as if I didn't have a care in the world. Lauren wasted no time. "Scott, have you received any calls from vendors or clients?" Her voice was sharp, but there was a hint of unease underneath. I tilted my head slightly. "Nope." I pulled my phone from my pocket and tossed it onto the table in front of her. "Check for yourself." She hesitated before picking it up, scrolling through my texts and call logs, her brows furrowing deeper with every second. Then she turned to Austin. "They must be lying," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone in the room. I shrugged. "Or maybe someone's just not doing their job?" I glanced at Austin, whose face was quickly turning red. Lauren ignored my jab and pressed on. "Scott, some vendors are claiming they called you directly." I smirked and leaned back in my chair. "Austin is the head of the department now, isn't he? That makes it his responsibility, not mine." I stood up, adjusting my sleeves, making it clear I had no intention of staying a second longer. Austin, clearly panicking, blurted out, "Scott, I need your help to get the agreement closed with Garage Brothers. They have not renewed the license agreement." I stopped and turned to him, my expression unreadable. "Sorry. You're qualified enough to do that on your own?" I said, my voice calm but laced with mockery. Lauren shot up from her seat, her eyes blazing. You will help him, do you understand? I met her gaze completely unfazed and let a slow, satisfied smile creep onto my face. Nope. I sat, back in my chair completely at ease as Lauren lost what little composure she had left. She was screaming her voice, shrill and laced with fury, but I didn't flinch. I just watched, taking in every second of her meltdown, letting it fuel the satisfaction. Brewing inside me, she had always been so calculated, so smug, always in control, but now she was panicking right in front of me. It was beautiful when she finally ran out of breath. I leaned forward slightly and said, voice calm, almost bored, so, unless you're interested in giving me a BJ right now, I'm going home. Her face twisted into something almost inhuman. Pure rage taking over. What the hell did you just say, before she could launch into another tantrum? Austin stepped up, puffing out, his chest like he actually had some kind of authority over me. What did you just say? He demanded, trying to sound tough. I stood up right in his face and said, I'll wait, if Lauren wants to give me a BJ. I took a step further, lowering my voice, just enough to make it personal. You can stand here like a puny little employee and watch if you want. His face went red, and for a split second I could see the hesitation in his eyes. Then he did exactly what I was hoping he'd do. He swung at me. Big mistake. His fist never connected before it could. I caught his wrist, twisted it effortlessly, and with one sharp motion, I dislocated his shoulder. A sickening pop filled the room, followed immediately by his agonized scream as he crumpled to the floor, clutching his useless arm. Lauren shrieked again. Her eyes wilded with disbelief. I'm going to fire you, she screamed, as if that was supposed to scare me. I turned to her, taking a slow step in her direction. I dare you, I said, voice low and steady. She grabbed her phone and immediately called HR, barking orders. Prepare his termination letter. Now I exhaled slowly, took my chair and sat back down, completely relaxed, watching her scramble like a cornered rat. A few minutes later, an HR rep walked in, a pale young woman clutching a manila folder in her trembling hands. She handed it to Lauren, who snatched it from her without so much as a glance. Lauren marched up to me and threw the letter at my chest. You're fired, she spat. I let the paper fall to my lap and slowly stood up, stretching slightly before turning to her with a smirk. Thanks, I said, stepping closer now. Can I get that BJ? I let the words hang for a moment, enjoying the way her face contorted in absolute disgust. You were always good at that. I was just wondering if I could get one last one. She looked at me with confusion at that very moment. There was a knock at the door. The tension in the room shifted instantly, as all eyes turned toward the entrance. A man dressed in a crisp suit stepped inside, his expression unreadable as he walked straight to Lauren without a word. He extended a manila envelope to her. You have been served, he said flatly, before turning and walking right back out, leaving only silence in his wake. Lauren stood frozen for a second, then ripped open the envelope. Her fingers trembling slightly, her eyes scanned the documents inside, and the moment she realized what she was holding, she exhaled sharply. Divorce papers. The reason: irreconcilable differences. She let out a long, slow sigh, her lips pressing into a thin line. You know, she murmured, almost as if she had expected this. I met her gaze and simply nodded. No words were necessary. Then, without missing a beat, I reached into my pocket and pulled out another document, unfolding it slowly before handing it to her. She glanced at the paper and then back at me, her brow furrowing in confusion. I'm giving up my paternity rights for Christopher, I said, my voice even unwavering. Lauren's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I could see the gears turning in her head, the mix of emotions flickering across her face before she could protest. I continued now. If you even think about contesting this, I will make sure your IPO fails. I will label you as that you are, and I will make sure that your business is finished. I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough to make sure she knew I wasn't bluffing. And Lauren, after all these years, deep down. You know damn well that I can do that. Her jaw clenched, and for a brief moment I wondered if she was about to put up a fight, but then just as quickly she exhaled, grabbed a pen from the table, and signed both papers without hesitation. 3 days later, we were in court. The process was swift, almost clinical. Lauren had agreed to let me walk away from Christopher. No arguments, no drawn-out battles. I sat there watching as the judge reviewed the paperwork, feeling an odd mix of emotions I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe relief. Definitely I knew this was the right move. Christopher wasn't mine. He never had been. And as much as it stung, I understood that some things were never meant to be. I felt bad, but I knew that this was what I was supposed to do. A few days after the divorce was filed, Gregory called me. I half expected some half-hearted attempt to convince me to reconsider, but he had no such intentions. Gregory was a businessman through and through. Sentiment had no place in his world. Scott. He greeted, his voice as measured as ever. I assume you've got plans for what's next. I smirked, leaning back in my chair. You mean another venture? Naturally, he replied. You have a mind for business. It would be a shame to see it go to waste. I let out a short chuckle. I plan to rest for now, take my time. Decide later. Gregory was silent for a moment, likely analyzing my words the way he always did. He was a shark, but he wasn't my enemy, not yet. As for Lauren, I done? Nope, I had already set the next phase in motion. Lauren thought she had won. She thought despite the divorce, she still had her victory, her company, her IPO, her empire. She was about to learn otherwise 2 days before the IPO launch. I made my final move. I asked Alex to sign the licensing agreement with a company based in Ohio. It was a strategic play, one that Austin, in his arrogance and incompetence, would never see coming, and just as I expected, Mr. I'm the smartest gay in the room, Austin never followed up with Garage Brothers, the company we had been working with. He was as clueless as a T-Rex trying to use chopsticks. Maybe he thought the deal would magically finalize itself. Maybe he was too busy counting his future millions. Either way, he didn't. Panic, at least not yet. The meltdown began only when the news broke exactly 1 day before the IPO launch. The front page of the business section read, IPO, bound tool manufacturer loses licensing to rival. I could practically hear Austin's heartbeat flatlining from across town. The fallout was immediate. My phone started buzzing. Non-stop calls, voicemails, texts. Lauren was in full damage control mode. Some messages were frantic, her voice laid with desperation. Others were pure rage, lashing out, as if she could somehow undo what had already been set in motion. I sat in my office with Alex playing each voicemail on speaker. Scott. What the hell is going on? Call me back. Now. Delete, you smug little. Do you have any idea what you've done? We need to fix this immediately. Delete, Scott. Please just call me back. That one made Alex chuckle. Sounds like she's going through all 5 stages of grief in real time. I grinned and pressed play on the next one. Lauren's voice was shaking with fury. If you think you're getting away with this, you're dead wrong. Alex nearly doubled over, laughing. She really doesn't get it, does she? I leaned back in my chair, feeling nothing but satisfaction. Nope. We listened to every voicemail, every panicked rant, and every angry threat, and with each one we laughed harder. We laughed and had a good time. The IPO came through, and I let the celebrations commence. The company had placed its share price at $5 apiece, believing the market would respond favorably. Then, and only then, did I make the call. It took less than 24 hours. The next morning, the business headlines exploded. IPO bound tools manufacturer held on to vendor payments to claim cashier status. The exposé was brutal. Pages of financial discrepancies, vendors coming forward about being ghosted clients, confirming delayed deliveries. It was all out in the open. Their online page published all the call recordings and vendor interviews, all of this just a day before the listing. The market responded like a pack of hungry wolves. Potential investors pulled back immediately, unwilling to buy into a company built on deception. There was no Trust no confidence, the IPO launched as scheduled, but the price didn't hold Lauren's dream of $5 shares gone when the stock finally opened. It did so at a humiliating 10 cents. All her dreams shattered and wrecked. People who had invested now wanted out. Then Gerald handed me a bomb. Gerald handed me the bombshell with an almost amused expression, as if he knew exactly what kind of chaos it would unleash. "Scott," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "You're going to love this." I opened it. Scanning the contents, my eyebrows lifted slightly as I read Austin had been charging vendors a 2% fee just to get their own invoices paid on time. Extortion plain and simple. Most of them had paid without complaint just to keep the business running smoothly. But they had no intention of staying with a company that bled them dry like this. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You have proof?" Gerald smirked. "Recordings, emails, statements. It's airtight." I grinned. "Then Leighton make it public." It didn't take long. The moment the news broke, the fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The recordings were damning. Austin practically boasting about his little scheme. Vendors came forward one after another, confirming the practice. It wasn't just fraud, it was organized corruption. Then came the real blow. The IRS got involved. Suddenly, the entire company was under investigation for financial misconduct, tax evasion, and business malpractices. And just like that, the empire Lauren had so carefully built was crumbling. At her feet, I knew the call was coming before my phone even rang. When Lauren's name flashed on my screen, I answered, keeping my tone light. "Lauren," I greeted, pretending to be surprised. "To what do I owe the pleasure, Scott?" She snapped all business. "You need to come to the office." I smirked. "And why is that?" She exhaled sharply, barely containing her frustration. "You're still a shareholder. You have to be here." That made me laugh. "Boy, you're dead. D is a good businessman. Talk to your father," I said dismissively, then hung up without waiting for her response. Hours later, the inevitable happened. Austin was arrested first. The authorities wasted no time, hauling him out in handcuffs, his face plastered across every news outlet. But the real prize came soon after Lauren. She was the CEO, after all, the head of the snake. She went down with him. When my turn came, I was more than ready. The investigators questioned me, but I barely had to say a word. I simply leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and stated the truth. I sold my shares to Gregory Spencer months ago. I told them calmly. I wasn't handling any department where I could make any financial decision through it all. Alex and Christine stood by me, just like they always had. When I was a kid. When I had nothing. When I was clawing my way up, they were there. And now, after the dust had settled, after my name was cleared and my enemies were buried under the weight of their own greed, they were still by my side. 6 months later, I received the official divorce. I stared at the paper for a moment, letting it sink in. It didn't bring me the kind of satisfaction I thought it would. There was no grand moment of triumph, no final act of revenge that made it all feel completed. It was just a piece of paper confirming what I had already known. I was free. Best part. I never had to pay her anything, and I never demanded anything from her. She was happy not to protest. That besides, she had to file for bankruptcy and shut down the company. She was in no position to pay me anything. Lauren, of course, never saw the inside of a prison cell. Rich people don't get convicted. Not really sure her reputation was in shambles, her company destroyed and her name permanently attached to scandal, but legally she walked away untouched. That's how the world works. But she didn't stick around to face the fallout. Instead, she packed her bags and slithered back to her father's house like the spoiled little princess. She always was. Austin, though he wasn't so lucky, the trial had been swift. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he had no one left to shield him. Extortion, business malpractice, a handful of financial crimes they could actually make stick. And yet, despite everything, despite the undeniable proof of his corruption, he got off easy 1 year. 1 pathetic year in prison. I waited. I knew Gerald would come through for me, and sure enough, the day finally came. He handed me a small slip of paper with a smirk. "Here it is," he said, tapping the page. "The name of the prison." I glanced at it, committing it to memory. Then I pulled out my phone and made the call. Ben answered on the second ring. Scott. He greeted Ben a while. I didn't waste time. I need a favor. There was a pause. Then a low chuckle figured. You'd call. I laid it out for him, the whole story. The betrayals, the fraud, the lies. How Austin had played his part. How he'd run the company into the ground. How he thought he was untouchable. Ben listened silent and patient, then let out a short laugh. So, what do you want me to do? I just need him to have a memorable stay. I said. Ben hummed. Considering you want him hurt, N. I said easily. Nothing that'll put him in the infirmary. Just a little adjustment period. Ben laughed again. Prison's got its own hierarchy. You know, a guy like Austin, soft corporate suit, never been in a real fight in his life. He's gonna have a rough time no matter what. I just want to make sure it's extra rough. I said, say no more. Ben replied, send me his picture. I did, and that the very next day, I got word from Ben Austin had been crowned the prison queen. 1 year of pure bliss for Austin. After everything that happened, I decided to step away from the chaos and settle into a quieter life. I moved into a small cottage near my brother's farm. Well, technically my farm, but I had given it to him. The cottage wasn't exactly modest, though. It had 7 rooms, a heated pool, and enough parking for several cars. It was smaller than my brother's place, sure, but it wasn't like I needed a mansion. I lived alone, and for the first time in a long while, I enjoyed the solitude. But all of that changed when I met Kelly. Christine introduced us one evening when I stopped by for dinner. Scott, this is my niece Kelly, she said with a warm smile. She just moved back to town. Kelly gave me a polite smile and a handshake. Nice to meet you. She was my age, which was already a good start. Not married, not engaged, another. Plus, but what really caught my attention was when Christine added, she's just getting into the dating game for the first time. I raised an eyebrow. First time? Kelly gave a small embarrassed laugh. Yeah, I guess you could say I've been a little busy. She wasn't kidding. Kelly was a biotechnology scientist, and from what I gathered, her entire life had revolved around research experiments and lab work. Dating had never been a priority that night. We talked for hours. She was smart, funny, and had a way of making even the most complex scientific concepts sound interesting. And while she might have been inexperienced in relationships, she was curious. We started seeing each other regularly, dinners, long walks, quiet nights by the fireplace, and then, of course, I took it upon myself to give her a first-hand lesson in human biology. 7 months later, she was practically glowing. You know, she teased one evening as we lounged by the pool, I think I've learned more about anatomy with you than I ever did in med school. I smirked, happy to help with your education. She nudged me playfully. Well, Professor, I hope you're ready for a permanent student because I'm moving in. I didn't mind. In fact, I wanted her there. She'd be sharing the cottage with me and my 2 German shepherds. You're good with that, right? I asked, watching her reaction. Kelly smiled. Of course, I love dogs. She was fine with that. Dear LERS, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.